All right, welcome back to another comics-based nerd venture. I know eventually I want to get to different things, but I figured for right now, a lot of people are interested in the comic book stuff that I'm talking about, and I'm also interested in talking about it, so why stop a good thing? Let's keep it rolling. And today I'd like to talk about my top 5 collecting tips. This video is targeted at, beginning to intermediate collectors. I am by no means an expert collector at this point. I'm sure there's lots of things that I'm going to learn in the coming years that I can hopefully pass on. But this is something that I would have liked to watch maybe 3 years ago when I was just starting collecting. It's sort of a video message to myself back in time about ways that I could have saved money, ways that I could have made my life easier, just things in general that are good to know when you're starting out collecting and to build your library up like I have now. Without further ado, let's dive into tip number 1. And my number 1 tip is terms and formats. Be familiar with what you want to collect and what the terms around collecting actually mean. And what better place to start than probably the least premium format, which is single issues or floppies, right? Just what you'll see at garage sales or comic book shops. There's gaggles and gaggles of these things floating out in the world. You can pick them up for a relatively cheap price, and they're an awesome way to start collecting if you'd like to get into this kind of format. There's a few different terms associated with them, not that many. The first thing to be aware of is they're often known as floppies in the collector community, so single issues or floppies is something that people talk about a lot. One thing that you should know about is bags and boards if you're collecting these, which is, if you can see, there's a like a cardboard backed board in the back of this, and then the book itself is encased in a like a laminate protected bag. So that's a common thing. If you go to comic book stores or like used bookstores or something like that, they'll often have their back issues, which is everything that's not new, that's not coming out this month. They'll have their back issues bagged and boarded for you to pick up. And if not, if you're just buying single loose floppies like this, the bags and boards you can buy in bulk from pretty much any comic book retailer. 75 or 100 bags and boards for, I don't know, $10, $15, depending on what quality you're going to look for. And when it comes to storing single issues, the most common way by far is in either long or short boxes, which are just fold-out cardboard boxes. This is a short box. This is about all the single issues I even have. I don't collect very many. But you can buy those at comic book stores for, pretty cheap, and they have little houses that you can buy too that let them slide in and out, sort of like mini bookshelves. So if you want to get a singles collection going, grab some bags and boards, grab some short boxes, and start collecting. You can get them for pretty cheap in a lot of places, which I'll talk about later. The one term that is kind of important for single issues is variant covers, right? So what's really popular right now, and what has been popular in the past, is basically when a new number 1 launches, when a new series is launching, there'll be a variety of different variants, sort of different artists maybe who will do their own take on the cover or different things like that. And the thing to know about variants is that there's different levels of rarity with them. So if you're looking at something online that's talking about variants, you'll see usually maybe 1:100 or 1:10. What that basically means is this particular variant is a 1 in 100 variant, or a 1 in 5, or a 1 in 10. So it just means that out of all of these comics produced, there are, let's say for every 100, there's one of this specific variant. And moving right along, we get into the next set of terms and formats, which are original graphic novels, trade paperbacks, and standard size hardcovers. So this is how a lot of people choose to collect comic books. Probably the most popular way to collect is with trade paperbacks. And so a trade paperback is a collection of issues which had been released previously, like this Swamp Thing trade was released in the 80s, it's 8 issues or something like that, which were released previously, and they're going to be collected into this standard size trade paperback. And trade paperbacks are usually the same size as the original issues that they collect. And there is a difference between a trade paperback and a graphic novel. I see those terms thrown around pretty loosely and mixed up, but what a graphic novel technically is something that was released in this format and was never released as individual single issues, right? So graphic novels like this is just a story. It's 100 and something pages, 200 pages, and it's only released in this novel format, right? Whereas a trade paperback is something that was released in single issues and is now collected. So oftentimes people will throw about stuff like, oh, I'm reading the Watchmen graphic novel or whatever. It's actually not a graphic novel because it was 12 issues that were released. It was a miniseries, so it's actually a trade paperback. And I understand that that's a little nitpicky and maybe like stupid. You might not want to care about that. But it is kind of important when you're going into a comic book store and you say like, oh, I'm looking for the Batman graphic novel. They're not going to know what the hell you're talking about, right? Be familiar with the terms if you're planning on sharing this hobby with people. If you talk about a Batman graphic novel, they're instantly looking at single stories that Batman was in, and they'll point you towards this stuff, but maybe what you're actually talking about is a Batman trade paperback, right, that collects some issues of somebody's run, Scott Snyder, that's going on now, right? So just be aware that when you're talking about it to other collectors or comic book shop owners, a graphic novel is its own, singly contained thing, and a trade paperback is a collection of different issues. And then along with those two, we have a standard size hardcover. Sometimes this is called by Marvel, I think they call it like their premium edition or something like that. And the standard size hardcover is a book that is obviously hardcover, usually with a slipcase or whatever. And it is the same size as the trade paperback. It's no bigger, it's no smaller. It's just a hardcover version of the exact same content. Which brings us into our next term, which is trim size. And trim size refers to the literal size of the binding and everything all together contained within this book. So the trim size of these two books is the same, even though this one's a hardcover and this one's a softcover. Oversized hardcovers have a larger trim size. For example, this is an oversized hardcover as opposed to a regular hardcover. You can see if I put them together and sort of line up the corners, there's another inch or so on the top and a little bit difference on the bottom. So for these, you would say that the trim size is different. And these oversized editions are the way that I usually prefer to read comics because you get sort of larger pages. Oftentimes the construction is a little bit nicer, or the amount of content that it collects is a little bit more. So the oversized editions, which are also called deluxe hardcovers by some different companies, like I think this one actually is called Ex Machina, the deluxe edition, rather than, the oversized edition. Then from the oversized hardcovers, we take the next step up into the omnibus format. And the omnibus format is something that mostly Marvel and DC are the two that produce the most of these. And they often collect like maybe 3 or 4 different trade paperbacks or deluxe hardcovers. So it's the largest amount of content sort of in a single binding. And a lot of people really like these because of their binding itself, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But the omnibus size is usually the same as the deluxe hardcover size, somewhere about 11 inches by 7.5 inches, I think. It's like 11 by 7.7, something like that. So this is sort of the most premium hardcover format that Marvel puts out. DC puts out a slightly larger one, but this is like a really nice way to get into collecting creative runs by different authors, is to go the omnibus route, which has nice oversized pages, really, really nice construction quality, and the Marvel one especially is really, really well known amongst collectors for being a high quality product. And then if you're somebody who loves DC comics, DC has a line that sort of goes above their omnibus, which is the Absolute Edition. And the Absolute Edition is absolutely huge. It's about, I think, 11 by 15 inches, something around there. And all the Absolutes come in these really nice slipcases. And then the book itself is a really nice bound book. The Sandman ones that I have here especially are well known for their kind of nice leather binding. And these are really, really well done editions. Really, really gigantic premium pages. I'm not sure if that's the best shot to show you of it, but that's sort of the highest way that DC collects their stuff, the most premium format. But it is very, very expensive price to content wise, as opposed to omnibus or some other ways that you could get, the same or more content for much less than these bad boys. If you move outside of collecting just Marvel and DC stuff, things get a little more difficult to sort of easily explain because every company kind of has their own method for collecting stuff. For example, Dark Horse does a lot of these library editions, which are about the same size as the Absolutes, but usually don't come with slipcases. Some of them come with slipcases. It's, like I said, it's not as uniform as maybe a Marvel or DC line. There's also other companies that do artist editions, which like reproduce the full size of the original art, so it could be anywhere from like 17 inches tall or, you know, really, really large books. And there's also coffee table books, depending on what company sort of you're looking at reading from. So, you know, Marvel and DC produce the most of the stuff that I collect, and a lot of collectors, you know, enjoy finding a lot of the omnibuses, absolutes, and oversized hardcovers. But people like Dark Horse or Image or IDW, other big name publishers sort of have their own formats. But most of the time, you're looking at either, you know, absolutes, libraries, omnibuses, hardcovers, and then if you want to get back, like at the very beginning, the single issues. Those are sort of the most common ways to collect. And there are a few terms to know when you're talking about hardcovers and oversized editions. The first one that's really important is OOP. It's usually written as OOP, which means out of print, right? So for these really big deluxe formats, it's usually difficult for publishers to keep them stocked that much because it costs a lot to print. So a lot of these books become very expensive when they go out of print. So if you're looking online and you're trying to find information about something and you see OOP, know that it means that the book is no longer just on shelves. You can't just go to a comic store and find it or ask them to order it for you. It's something you have to acquire through the secondary market, through, you know, used bookstores or eBay or Amazon or what have you. Out of print, a very big deal for collectors like me, because when something looks like it's going out of print, all of a sudden it gets snapped up and it's really hard to find copies. So it's definitely something to be aware of when you're collecting. There's also variant covers, which still applies to omnibus and hardcover editions. So, for example, I just got a new kitty cat. He's a little happy. So, for example, when you're buying different hardcovers, you know, maybe it'll have a Jack Kirby variant like this, and then there's going to be another artist variant, and the only thing it changes is the dust jacket. It doesn't change the contents of the book with hardcovers. The variants only change the dust jacket. And then finally, in the terms and formats category, we have binding, which is an important thing to talk about for collecting hardcovers. There's two basic types of binding that most hardcovers fall under for comic books, which is either glued binding or sewn binding. And by and large, sewn is the way that most people prefer to go if they have the option. So the difference between the two is the way that the pages are attached to the book itself. So I'll give you an example. This book is a glued binding book. And if you can see these pages, they go directly into the spine. All of them go straight down directly into the spine. Hopefully you can see it. And they're just glued into the spine. What that means is when you open the book and you go to read it, there's no flex, there's no bend. The spine doesn't unfold itself, right? Because the pages are physically glued into the book. So you can see that the spine stays flush with the cardboard on the outside, the covers. And the problem with this, it's not so bad on a small book like this, but when you get into really large books and you have a really thick wad of paper that is you know, glued together, it doesn't bend out enough for you to read what's on the inside. This is called the gutter of the book, and you can get what's called gutter loss if you have these large volumes that are just glued together. Know that you might have a difficult time reading everything that's on the page. As opposed to this other format, sewn binding, where if you can see this, hopefully you can, the pages actually don't go straight down. Instead, they come and they're collected in these bunches. And so these page bunches are then sewn together into this inner ribbon. And that way it allows the book to open up and to flex a lot more. So if you can see, that spine actually separates, the inner spine separates from the outer spine. And that's because this has a really nice sewn binding on it. So if you're looking at books and you're trying to figure out the difference, if the pages go directly in and just stop hard in the spine, like this other one that I showed, that's a glued binding. And if they're collected into these bands, that's a sewn binding, because the bands are then sewn together. And this is a really nice way to read because you get almost no loss in the gutters, because the pages open so wide and it falls really, really easily. It doesn't snap shut on you. It's a much better reading experience overall, and that's the reason that many people prefer sewed and binding. Alrighty, moving on to collection tip number 2. My second tip is to know your resources and to spend your money wisely. And what I mean by that is there's a bunch of different websites and different books that are published by Marvel and DC that sort of give you a preview and let you know what's coming out, when it's coming out, what it's going to cost. You should know how you're going to spend your money and make sure that you're getting the best deal on these things. So one site that I use very, very often and I recommend highly is Collected Comics Library. I'll see if I can leave a link to it right here. And Collected Comics Library is this really awesome podcast / blog run by this guy named Chris. And on the blog, he has a list by week of everything that's coming out in hardcover, softcover, and omnibus format. Everything that's collected that's in a premium sort of format, he lists it all by publisher and by date. So you should definitely be looking at that and sort of planning ahead and seeing, if there's, for example, a Wonder Woman omnibus coming out in 2 months, are you really going to spend the time tracking down the trade paperbacks and the single issues? Don't waste your time and money on things that are going to be put out in a better format soon. So definitely check out Collected Comics Library. It's a real lifesaver. And along those same lines is solicitations, is what it's called. So there's one particular website where I read solicitations, which is Comic Book Resources, and I'll link that down below. And Comic Book Resources solicits, or solicitations, basically every major company will release their solicitations to CBR, Comic Book Resources, a number of months ahead of the actual releases. So if you go on there, you can see, I believe right now we're somewhere in like December, I think, and it's September. So in this month, DC, Marvel, and Image, and IDW, all the big publishers will release their solicitations to Comic Book Resources. You can go through and see, and they'll show you, when the book is being released, what is the trim size of it, if it's going to be who's writing it, who's drawing it, how much it's going to cost. And they do this for both single issues, hardcovers, softcovers, everything like that, and statues even, if you're interested in collecting statues. So solicitations is a great way to, keep up with what's coming out in the future, get, a first look preview at the different things that are going to be spotlighted and released by DC and Marvel, and just to keep yourself aware of what's coming out so you save money and time and resources. Everything is just laid out for you. It's much easier to know what you should be looking for based on what's going to be released in the future. And the final resource, which has been really invaluable to me, it's been great, is StashMyComics.com, which I'll also link down below. And StashMyComics is a website that's basically just a collection and wish list database manager. So you can search for different series, you can search for different authors, artists, whatever it is, and you can start creating your own stash on this website if you make a free account. It costs no money, it's really easy to use. And you can just go through and click on the different things that you have, add them to your collection, add them to your wish list, add them to anything like that, so you can sort of keep this running tally of what you have and what you need. It's a really convenient way to see an entire series and say, all right, I have 1 through 17, but I'm missing 4, 5, and 6 out of that, and I need to grab these other books from different places. It's a really nice place to keep it all in one. And what's even better is you can actually export your collection into Excel documents or a different spreadsheet reader like that. And then that's what I use usually, is I'll use the Stash My Comics to collect everything on there, export it into Excel, and then just mess around with it a little bit in there, because it's really easy to keep track of, how much you bought stuff for, what it's worth on the resale market right now. And it's just a great way to keep track of everything. You can access it on your phone really easily when you're going to comic book shops, because it's hard to keep in your head, what issue of what series you're missing. Definitely check it out. And if you're not using that particular one, there's other ones. I'm not familiar with any off the top of my head, but I would highly recommend keeping track of your collection in some way. Just some easy spreadsheet you can do yourself, or some other website or app maybe on your phone, which lets you just chronicle everything that you're coming in and coming out of your collection, so you know what to buy and you're not wasting time looking for things that you don't even need. Tip number 3 is where to buy these actual books, right? Now you know you know what they are from tip number 1. You know when they're coming out and how to chronicle all that from tip number 2. Tip number 3 is actually buying them. Most of my purchases, I would say about 75% of my personal purchases are through instocktrades.com, IST, which again, I'll link below. And InStock is really, really awesome. What it is basically a direct ordering service where on the week any book comes out, there will be massive discounts on that book. You're basically buying these hardcovers and softcovers from InStock at the price that comic book stores would buy them from, right? So when you go to a comic book store and you see an omnibus that is $100, you're just going to pay the $100 cover price at a comic book store. But if you go to InStock Trades, on the week it comes out, it's anywhere from 42 to 50% off usually. So you're going to be paying somewhere around, you know, $60 to $55 or whatever it is. And you're going to be getting it right at the distribution price. So if you're somebody like me who's mostly interested in collecting these hardcover versions, InStock Trades is going to be an amazing resource for you. It's going to allow you to get the best prices on things that are still in print. They do not carry out of print stuff, right? If it's not in print anymore, if you can only get it on the secondary market, don't even bother looking for it through InStock Trades because it just won't be there. But at the same time, I don't mean to disparage or slag off, you know, comic book stores, right? Comic book stores are an awesome place. I usually go there looking through their used hardcovers and also through their back issue single bins, right? So for me personally, I am not somebody who goes to a comic book store on the week that an omnibus comes out and drops the $100 cover price on that. It's just too much of a price disparity for me at this moment. So most of my hardcovers I buy through InStock Trades. But when I do go to different stores, comic book stores are awesome to look for out-of-print books. You know, maybe there's something that's selling for $150 online, but they happen to have it tucked away for the $40 cover price. You know, you never know what's in there. So I would highly, highly recommend getting familiar with your comic book store. You know, go in there, search for back issues if you need them, search for books that are out of print, search for used books. And oftentimes, if you're a customer that they know, you know, there's a little bit of price wiggling that can go on. At least I've found. You know, if you find something that's, especially if an expensive piece and you're willing to spend some money at this person's store, you know, it's nice to sort of have a little bit of give and take, get to know them, and you can usually score some good deals on stuff, especially that's out of print. And then lastly, I would highly recommend familiarizing yourself with used bookstores in your area that are not necessarily comic book related. You know, there's a lot of secondhand stores, like around me, it's Second and Charles is a store that used to be Books A Million, and they have tons of back issues. The problem with going to just bookstores that are not comic book specific is that the knowledge of the salespeople and the organization of the store is going to be questionable. So go in there, you know, prepared to dig a little bit. It's not going to be laid out alphabetically or by publisher always or by any discernible, you know, system. So go in there willing to dig around, and you can find some really cool gems because a lot of times people, you know, don't know exactly what they're getting. And of course, there's also comic conventions, comic cons. There's tons of them now that pop up. Little ones, little just one day, you know, 2-day weekend here and there in the gym at a school, in a little, you know, civic center, anything like that. You know, try to check out the stuff that's around you because a lot of times they're going to have really huge numbers of old back issues and old comics, and the vendors are not going to want to take them there and take them back. So a lot of times you can go there, find some stuff you're interested in, you know, bulk buy a lot of comics for not that expensive, or maybe you have some comics you're looking to trade. You can trade stuff to somebody else and it's not that expensive. It's just a really great way to get to know the local collecting community and to, you know, it's unusual that you're going to find some $5,000 Holy Grail, you know, Avengers issue. Most people there know what they have. But if you're just looking to bulk up your collection, get to know some people, swap some comics, it's a really cool thing to check out. And of course, there's always the dreaded eBay, right? eBay is a fickle beast because if you use it correctly, you should be able to see pretty much everything that you're interested in that's filtering through the site, which means that even if you see something that's really cool and out of print, it's unlikely that you're going to be the only one to see it, right? eBay is cool, and you can find some cool stuff on there if it's stuff that not that many people are interested in. But like ultimately, you're not going to go on there and score crazy deals all the time. The prices will work themselves out. You know, it looks good at the beginning, and then with a day left, you know, it creeps up to where you're like, oh, I don't want to know about this anymore. And then with 10 minutes left, it's, you know, way higher than you ever wanted to pay for it. So just don't get too excited about stuff on there. Keep a cool head when you're bidding, because it's easy to just get worked up and, you know, I need this now, and pay a much higher price than you ever wanted to. But it's a cool way to see, you know, market value of things on the second hand, what they're selling for, the kind of condition that they're selling these books at. It's definitely a resource to be used, but just keep in mind, it's not going to be something that where you find holy grails every 2 weeks because you're the only person bidding on it. It just doesn't work like that. There's too many people on the site. There's too many sellers. There's too many buyers. There's too many resellers and scalpers, and that's totally, you know, their prerogative. I'm not, you know, cracking down on them or anything or saying that they're not allowed to do it. It's just that you need to come into it aware that it's going to sort of work itself out, and you're going to end up paying a price that is not the crazy steal that you want. On to tip number 4. Tip number 4 is storage and preservation and upkeep of your collection. So myself personally, I use these Billy bookshelves from IKEA, which I've found to be really nice. They hold quite a bit of books, both oversized and regular format. The only thing that I don't love about them is that the middle shelf is actually not adjustable. So there is one shelf in these Billy bookcases which has to be, you know, in the middle when you're building it. The rest of them you can move around, but the middle shelf always has to be there. So for collecting certain size books, you know, it means that sometimes you're going to have like really tall shelf gaps and followed by a really small one because it has to be like that. That can be frustrating, but overall I found them to be, you know, a really, really awesome and sturdy bookshelf. There's also a version called the Kallax, I believe, which is like a cube shaped kind of bookshelf, and you can buy them in like, you know, sections of 4 cubes or 1x4 or 2x4. And the cubes themselves are somewhere around like 12 inches by 12 inches. So I've seen a lot of collectors online who use that shelf style, and it'll fit pretty much any type of book. So the Kallax and the Billy, 2 from IKEA, that are really, really great for storing your collections. I would also recommend, this is something that you don't have to do, some people do, some people don't. But when I get books, new books, I always open them to check for defects, okay? Because there's nothing worse than getting a new book saying, oh, I'm not going to read it for a year, I'll just leave it sealed, and, you know, it'll stay in better condition. And then a year later, you open it up, you realize that the binding is shot, or maybe some pages are stuck together, or there's a printing error, and, you know, it's been a year since you ordered it. Shit out of luck, right? They're not going to return something that's a year old, you know, regardless of who the company is. That's almost unheard of. So I would recommend personally opening up your stuff, you know, stretching out the spine, which I'll show you momentarily, and kind of making sure that everything is in working order, if you will, before you sort of leave it there for a year and then you find out something's wrong with it. There's also dust jackets. Personally, myself, I take the dust jackets off of the books when I read them. I find it's a good way to just kind of keep track of what I'm reading. Not that I'm ever reading like 20 books at a time, but I'll just take the dust jacket off, leave it in a spot on the shelf, read the book without it because I don't want to crease or bend or fold the dust jacket. And then, you know, when I'm done, put it back on the shelf. So that's totally up to you. There's dust jacket protectors that you can buy out there. That's sort of like plastic that go around the dust jacket. It does make the book itself like a little bulkier and tighter than it was intended to, so sometimes they don't fit on the shelf that well, or into slipcases, especially if you have a slipcase and you put a dust jacket cover on there, it can get really tight in there. And now I will cut over to a separate video where I'll show you stretching a spine of a book. How to open up a book for the first time, especially these sewn books, in a way that will not cause any tension or folding to happen on the spine. Okay, so let's talk about opening hardcovers in a way that will preserve their life on your shelf. The best way to do it, I found, is to set your book down on a flat surface like this, to open each cover, and then to slowly take the pages
and press them out bit by bit and move towards the middle. Basically, the goal of this is to stretch the spine as much as you can so that when you start reading the book, you don't have these weird creases and patches where the spine doesn't want to bend in a certain way and you end up with either kind of weird folding or spine damage. And if you're doing it correctly, like I hope I am, you should start to see this gap form between the bottom spine and the inner spine. So then eventually when you get to the middle of the book, you can pick it up and see that you have a nice spine stretch going on in between those. And now you should be ready to read your book and not have it have any spine damage.
Alrighty, and then the fifth and final tip is just familiarize yourself with the companies that you most often buy from and get to know their strategies and the way that they put out books. So for example, like I was saying, Marvel, you'll often see the single issues put out on a monthly basis. Then they'll collect a very small soft cover, of maybe only 5 or 6 issues. And then when 2 or 3 of those soft covers are out, then they'll collect a nice big hardcover. And then when 3 or 4 of those hardcovers are out, and if it proves to be very, very popular, then you'll get an omnibus like this. So it's just something to be aware of. If you're somebody who needs to read it now, with a lot of these companies, you're going to be double dipping or triple dipping or whatever. You could buy the singles, then you could buy the soft covers, then you could buy the hard covers, then you could buy the omnibus. Just, if you like to read something but you don't care about how quickly you read it, in my opinion, save yourself some money, wait until the collection is put out in a format that you really care about. Because there's so many books out there you could be reading, don't worry. This is just my opinion. Don't worry about reading what's coming out at this moment if it's going to cost you, 3 times as much down the line to buy every version of it. DC, on the other hand, is a little bit different. They usually put out the single issues, then they'll put out a lot of soft covers, and then they put out hard covers that are the same size as soft covers, so they don't usually put out deluxes. And then once the series is sort of wrapped up, then they'll put out deluxe editions. So right now, DC's arguably most popular series is the Scott Snyder Batman series. That's something like 40-some issues in, and it hasn't had a deluxe collection yet. Whereas some of these Marvel books behind me over here are only, the same number of issues in, and they've already had 2, 3 deluxe collections. So DC is a company that sort of puts out everything in a standard format, and then once that whole thing is done, they'll collect it into absolute editions or into deluxe hardcovers after it's all done. But they're not exactly a company that is always right on the ball with putting out deluxe editions as the series is running. There's also Image Comics, which right now is really booming in popularity from Saga and other really, really popular creator-owned stuff. And they're somewhere in the middle because a lot of times it's more up to the creative team to sort of police what is going on with their stuff. So, if the writers and the artists and Image decide that they're going to put out a certain format, then maybe they'll put out a oversized, maybe they'll put out a really big oversized. That is really dependent on the series. So if you're an Image fan, you really have to just familiarize yourself with the series and how the series is being collected because it's a case-by-case basis and not every series gets the same treatment by Image. And I think that about wraps up this video. Coming up next week, I'm going to have my first subscriber giveaway. Exciting, because I broke 100 subscribers. So thank you very much to anybody who's watched or subscribed to any of these videos. I really, really appreciate it. It happened a lot faster than I thought, so thank you so much. If you're a subscriber already, you're good to go. But in the next week when I talk about the books I'm going to talk about, one of those books I'm going to give away to somebody who's subscribed in the channel. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching these videos. I'd love if you hit like if you enjoyed it, dislike if you didn't like it. So far, 0 dislikes. Don't jinx it, don't tell anybody, right? Please subscribe if you like this kind of content. I'll keep on pumping out more comics related stuff. Until we get like a nice base following, and then maybe I'll branch out to a few other things. But for right now, I'm really enjoying talking about comics. If you want to follow me on Tumblr, that would be super awesome. The Nerdventurer, I'll link it down below. I'm always posting, books I pick up in the wild or different artists and stuff I'm interested in. So that's a great way to keep up with me. And I hope this is enough content for you guys to chew through until next week. And I'll see you then. Thanks so much.